So good evening, and I want to welcome everyone to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony for the Alaska Innovators Hall of Fame. And the MCs for tonight will be Dan White and Mead Treadwell. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dan White. Dan White was appointed the University of Alaska System Vice President for Academic Affairs and Research in 2015. Prior to this appointment, he served as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research and headed the Office of Intellectual Property and Commercialization at UAF, and was the Director of the Institute of Northern Engineering. Dan's interest and expertise in sanitary engineering led him to pursue issues related to freshwater in the Arctic, spending considerable time in rural villages and remote locations. His work has led to a better understanding of water resources for rural communities, as well as potential impacts of climate change on the freshwater resources and infrastructure. Please welcome Dan White.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. I think I've been to all of the innovation summits, at least in recent years, and really enjoy this atmosphere. And thank everyone for coming, because I think I have gained something from every summit I've been to, and I've gained things because of the interactions and the connections and the people that I've met in these venues. So thanks for your participation in the Innovation Summit. And I see a lot of familiar faces out there from previous ones, so I know that people are coming back to these because they've made a difference for a lot of other people as well. As Vice President for Academic Affairs and Research for the University of Alaska, one of the things that I get to do is co-chair the State Committee on Research. And I co-chair that with the Lieutenant Governor, Byron Malat. He's not able to be here tonight, but the SCoR, as we call it, the State Committee on Research, is made up of business leaders, agency leaders, and university leaders, and it's a coordinating body. I know there's a number of SCoR committee members. I see Karen is here, Karen Schmidt, who's the Vice Provost for Research at UAS, is here, and Brian Holst is a member. Are there other members of SCoR that were able to attend? I know Steve Gray, who's head of the USGS Climate Center in Anchorage, is here in participating in the summit, but couldn't be here at the moment. But so SCoR was established around 20 years ago to develop a state research and development plan. And I had the pleasure of being involved with it for most of those years. But I can say that really, so I'm getting a signal back there. Okay, different signal. Really the pivotal moment for me in my kind of history of work with SCoR was when Lieutenant Governor Mead Treadwell joined SCoR. Because prior to that, in the decades prior to that, or decade or so, we had really been focused on the research and development plan for Alaska. And Lieutenant Governor Treadwell joined and said, we need to focus on research and development for Alaska. And really turn the focus not away from research, but towards development. And not resource development per se. Resource development is good, but development of intellectual capital and intellectual property and businesses and economic development for Alaska. So really for the years since then, for the last 6 or so years, we've been really focused on economic development. And so this is really a great venue to host this event, which is the Innovators Hall of Fame. One of the things that SCoR has done, and again, this was at Lieutenant Governor Treadwell's kind of inspiration, was to recognize, one of the things we don't do that well is kind of recognize and lift people up and say, these are great developments and these are the great innovators who are changing Alaska for us and for future generations. And so SCoR has now 2 classes of innovators that have been inducted, or this will be the second, inducted into the Innovators Hall of Fame. And this is our chance to say, these people are leading the way for Alaska. I am going to now get the pleasure of introducing a person, Lieutenant Governor Treadwell, who needs no introduction. He is, of course, well known and loved throughout Alaska, especially in the capital city. But I'm going to introduce him anyway, just because it is such a great pleasure to be able to do that. And if you don't know, 40 years 40 years, Mead has been making an impact as a leader and across the Arctic, developing collaborations for Alaska across the Arctic. Major player in developing relationships and policies that are impacting the Arctic and impacting Alaska. He's done that as the chair and a member for longer than that as of the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, as lieutenant governor, as the SCoR co-chair. And I think equally important is his role as an innovator himself. He has done all this work for us as innovators, but he's an innovator himself and an investor and has started companies across the spectrum, technology, manufacturing. So without further ado, thank you, Mead, and welcome.
Well, Dan, that was very kind, and for those of you who haven't had a chance to work with the University of Alaska's statewide Vice President for Academic Affairs and Research, Dan White is himself a very innovative engineer, has inspired. I met one student, he's inspired to be an engineering student here already today. But, you know, I think what you see in this room and what you see on this stage epitomizes Alaska, which is we are innovators because we have to be. We live in a part of the world that is known for cold. It's known for dark. It's known for distance. It's known, and may they rest in peace, though I hope we find them recently, it's known for danger, offshore and inshore. It's known for riches. And the one thing that I think we can all say about Alaska is whether we're digging a hole or felling a tree or drilling a hole or building a hotel or showing tourists how ice melts, or showing tourists a wonderful collection of big brown bears over on Admiralty, there's nothing we do here that is not a knowledge-based industry. And as a knowledge-based industry state, it's our responsibility to help advance the frontiers of knowledge. It's our responsibility to promote innovation, to foster innovation, and that's what we're doing here today. Now, the interesting thing about innovation is it comes in many, many different ways. Dan was kind, and he talked about how I've started some technology companies. I've had the opportunity to start 2 public technology companies traded on stock exchanges in global capital markets. In both cases, the inventors of these technologies were people with bachelor's degrees who just said, you know, there's got to be a way to, in one case, digitally watermark currency and sound and photos. In another case, do a spherical camera that was pioneered Street View for Google. But what's interesting about it is that in order to get those technologies into the marketplace, we needed to also work with a good university, with good universities across the country. Because universities, even if they're not inventing them, and we actually have several people from our universities here getting awards today, but they do help verify. What do you have? What do you know? What do we get? And so for that reason, I'm very proud of the fact that the State Committee on Research has kind of taken it upon itself to help make our universities as porous as possible. Not as poor as possible, that's somebody else's job, and we're fighting that every day. But as porous as possible, in that knowledge comes in and knowledge comes out, and that we together address challenges here in Alaska. Now, those of you who remember The Wizard of Oz, the wizard at one point told the cowardly lion that he actually did have courage and gave him a medal for courage. And he said, oh, I guess I do have courage. And part of the idea between the Northern Innovators, or behind the Northern Innovators Hall of Fame, is that Alaskans themselves often don't recognize how innovative we are. You know, we went back and looked at this when I was Lieutenant Governor, and we found out that sunglasses pretty much came about on Earth in 2 places about the same time. Very thinly sliced jade in China so that judges really couldn't see what was in the judge's eyes. And snow goggles, snow blindness goggles, made by Alaska natives. The kayak, a symbol, something used all over the world. I've kayaked in pretty much every ocean, was invented here. The trampoline with the blanket toss was invented here. The ingenious fish traps that continue were invented here. And so today, in honoring named innovators, there's also unnamed innovators that we honor in terms of pointing forward to Alaska as being an innovative place. So what I'd like to do today is this, we'd like to present an award to 8 folks, 7 who are here today. One of our honorees is in Italy and can't be here today. And ask them each to tell us a little bit of what helped spark their innovation for you. And I'd like to first invite up Rajiv Ganguly from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Rajiv, come on up. Now let me just say that today mining in Alaska accounts for more than $3 billion in production and exploration each year. It creates thousands of jobs. And Ganguly is a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks who's developed a simulator software as part of the university's program for training mill operators on large-scale mines. And mill operators run machinery, they read schematics and plans, they monitor job progress, and sometimes perform equipment maintenance. And along with UAF's Tagatha Ghosh, Ganguly's team created a software-based training tool to enhance a 12-week program at UAF. In the first offering of the class last year, 9 students graduated from the program, and right after they finished, representatives from Kensington, Greens Creek, Fort Knox, and Pogo mines were there to interview them for current or future jobs. Industry experts figure the need for Alaska mill engineers will triple by the year 2022, and the goal of the course, and in particular this software, is to customize the mill operator's training for specific jobs. So you were already voted a rock star of Alaska mining by the Alaska Miners Association, and Ganguly is popular with both students and the industry representatives with whom he so often confers. And his students really appreciated the fact, I guess I would have appreciated this as a student, and that you let them create a big blast out of the Silver Fox mine, which is owned by the university. You've also helped raise millions for a mining industry-sponsored endowment for graduate research and develop an agreement with the government of Mongolia, where your goal is actually to train Mongolians at University of Alaska Fairbanks. Ladies and gentlemen, Rajiv Ganguly.
Well, thank you very much. And so, I want to recognize my wife, who usually listens to some crazy ideas before she gives me the green light. I take permission from her for everything, so. No, mining, when you look at mining, all the money that gets spent, I tell this to my students as well and to anybody who will listen. Sometimes it takes 20, 30 years. You litigate a mine. A lot of people work hard. The mine gets built. That rock comes out of the ground, spends about a few hours with you, and that's the only time in the entire chain that spans decades that you have the opportunity to recoup your investment. That's it, those few hours. So when you look at mill training, there is not a single mill operator training program in the United States. We have a love-hate relationship with the industry in the US, and that's part of the reason. And so I felt as an educator that the place where the industry actually makes the money, that's where we need to inject training. And this is especially true for Alaska because we have a very transient professional community. People get jobs, they come, they leave, you recruit them from outside. And so this is where this tool came about. And at some point, we were lucky, we got funding, we had a good team. We were able to hire Dr. Ghosh, and some fantastic graduate students, Vaibhav Raj and Vaibhav Srivastav and others. And it's been great. And so I really want to thank all of them. And I want to thank, Kinross, Sumitomo, SCoR, and Hekla. They're partners in the project. And tomorrow is our alpha release of the product. And it's only invitation only at this point. We release it to the engineers so they can put it through the grind, put it to the mill. See, that was a joke. See, right there. that was when I wing it, the quality of jokes are terrible. But next month is our beta release, and we're hoping to commercialize. And I'm starting to learn about commercialization. You know, in engineering, they don't teach you much about that. So I'm learning, and I'm hoping to gain some wisdom from this room. So thank you so much. Thank you.
So I had a chance to meet Jeff and Marcy Larson, our next honorees, earlier today. But it was about 30 years ago that former Mayor Bill Overstreet called me and said, you know, if you have $5,000, I have some friends who are starting a brewery. And my kids, who really enjoy the product of that brewery, as I do, have said, Dad, you know, why didn't you make that investment when you could have? But it was 30 years ago, powered by their affection for beer, that Marcy and Jeff Larson created the brewery in a small Alaska city. Now, the idea of a craft brewery is not new. There's you can find, for example, 20 of them in Fort Collins, Colorado. But cracking outside markets, and I remember at one point being at an advertising agency in Seattle, and they said, we've just gotten the contract for an Alaska brewery to help take this brand national. And it was very, very exciting. All of us were very excited to see an Alaska brand now, which is, I guess, in 18 states, you tell me. Now, what's interesting is the innovation in this brewery has been, there have been numerous kinds of innovation that are absolutely significant in Alaska. Some would say the innovation is in the product itself, and I particularly enjoy beer that is made with spruce tips and alder smoked malt. But how about this? Beer-powered beer, where they've saved more than 80,000 gallons of number 2 diesel fuel each year by using the spent brewing grains to power a steam boiler that sprung from their own imaginations. And if that's not good enough, and that saves grain that used to go into either waste pits or go to had to be dried and sent to farmers in Washington State. So rather than barging out the grain or overwhelming the Juneau landfill, the brewery burns the dried product, and it creates steam that powers the brewing process. And this has allowed Alaskan Brewing Company to be true to a lofty stated goal, to have a zero net negative effect on our environment by reclaiming and reusing at least as much waste and emissions as we produced. So that's not the only innovation. Another was a mash filter grain press that saved more than 1 million gallons of water over their older method, a traditional ladder tun. And the latter, they explained, is to drip coffee what the mash press is to a French press espresso machine. And then finally, you've seen a CO2 produced in the process of making beer has been channeled back into the bottling process. And that has saved more than 900,000 pounds of CO2 from being released into the atmosphere every year, and that's like removing 80 cars from the road. So, Jeff and Marcy, I would give you this just for your beer, but you've got much more for that, and congratulations, and come on up.
I have a very, very wonderful wife, and she assigned me this duty to talk on our behalf. And a lot of thanks needs to be given, but I was given a task, and that is what inspired us to do this. And I would say it's our locale. Maybe you could also say necessity is the mother of invention, because as we grew, our spent grain was a bit of a problem. Most people take the spent grain, which is the residue of the grain that after you've taken all the good stuff up to make beer, you have this residue that you have to get rid of. Many people use it for cattle feed, and there aren't that many cows in Juneau. So we were giving it to the local garden community, and we were pretty much burying them. And so thank you for them to be part of our solution. But as we grew, we had to overcome this growing amount of grain. And so we started using the grain as a fuel, and we slowly developed the process, and we now are the only brewery in the world that has a steam boiler powered 100% by spent grain. Spent grain is very difficult to burn. As a side note, it's very high in protein, and it tends to crust over, and it's very difficult. Heineken tried to do it and failed. Newcastle spent $25 million to try to do it and failed. And we were able to do it, but in many ways, the reason is we had to. And I just think back in the history of Juneau, the first lake tap of North America to power, to generate electricity was here because they needed to. And I think about some of the people that I really have to thank, and that's the greater community of Alaska. We started shipping beer, and we were approached by our own shipper, Linden Transport, and they said, hey, instead of you shipping it to Seattle to get it north, which would be the more common route, why don't we just get it over the road? That'll help us to cover that one leg so we can get the mail contract. So it was a community that really generated many of the opportunities for us to grow, whether it be the gardeners initially and then the ultimate development of our process. But also, I think, when it came down to the challenges we had the biggest burden in the world, and that is the leap of faith that 88 fellow Alaskans made to allow us to start. And that was their belief that came in the form of a check. Not everybody had to do that, but what ended up happening is we got support from all other sectors, even the people that couldn't afford or maybe didn't get as convincing the advisors to make them do that. But our stockholders were really the people that we felt so indebted to that we were going to make it work, come hell or high water. They talk about the cutting edge of technology. Well, I kind of call it the bleeding edge of technology because it is very, very humbling. So besides those investors who range from Kotzebue to Ketchikan, from Yukon Charlie to Yakutat, obviously here in Juneau, Anchorage, and Fairbanks, we have many stockholders who are very happy to be part of the family. But I think of also the team at the brewery, because that blood, sweat, and tears, the bleeding edge of technology, came in the form of long hours, challenges, and without everyone pitching in together, it could not have been done. So thank you for this honor. And
on behalf of the brew crew. And I just want to say we're accepting it on behalf of the Alaskan Brew Crew, because that really was all of us together that made it happen.
Okay, we gotta go.
Great. Thank you. Our next honoree, well, thank you guys, and thank you, not only for giving us a beer that makes you feel good, but also makes you feel good about the way it's made. It's wonderful. Our next honoree is Jeff Rothman. Now, every once in a while, someone looks at a product and thinks, I can make that better. And then people turn to the next distraction, and the leap does not happen. But our honoree, Jeff Rothman, persisted. He improved a sensor that, when deployed in an Alaska forest, can detect a nuclear explosion on the far side of the planet, or a volcanic eruption in an Aleutian storm, and his patented infrasound sensor is smaller, more accurate, and uses less power than its predecessors. While other sensors are the size of a blender, his is a hockey puck. Now, Rothman is the inventive supervisor of the electronics shop at the Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And there, in the basement of the 8-story LV building, he engineers solutions for researchers who launch rockets into the aurora, those who study glaciers, and those who fly unmanned aerial vehicles. And the university and Rothman were awarded a patent for his tiny infrasound monitor in April 2016. And those hockey pucks, by the way, are now sold by Chaparral Physics, part of the Geophysical Institute. The Institute purchased the assets of that New Mexico company in 2004. Now, infrasound waves have a frequency below 20 hertz, which is about the lowest frequency we can detect, though migrating songbirds can perhaps use it for direction finding. And infrasound waves are big, slow, and long-lasting and come from nuclear explosions, winds over distant mountains, volcanoes, the roar of the ocean, and even the aurora. And UAF's Buck Wilson once detected a nuclear bomb detonated in China, and the wave from the blast took more than 6 hours to get to Fairbanks. But the signal registered again 37 hours later as the wave completed another lap of the Earth. Now, what's interesting is our honoree today, along with his work on infrasound, Rothman has developed a small reusable sounding rocket that can save researchers thousands and allowing them to test payloads without mounting a full campaign. His 10-foot carbon fiber rocket is an alternative to a ride on a full-scale rocket that can cost $1 million or more, and scientists and students can use his rocket for about $10,000. That's faster, cheaper, and better. He's a flight instructor, an unmanned aerial vehicle operator. He also designed an electric field probe for atmospheric scientists, tested and helped develop ejectable payloads for NASA, sounding rockets, supervised the operation of a Department of Energy particle accelerator, and redesigned a prototype human kidney perfusion apparatus. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Rothman.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is thank my wife, Juliet, for putting up with me, because I spend a lot of time wandering around and thinking about and puzzling about technical problems when I should be out mowing the lawn. I'd also like to thank SCoR for this honor. I'd like to thank the director of the Geophysical Institute, Bob McCoy, and my boss, Jamie Warwick, for giving me the freedom to pursue what I thought was going to be a good idea. And I can't take credit for the germ of the idea. That came from another researcher. The Geophysical Institute has been building these infrasound sensors for a long time, and the previous generation of sensors, as was mentioned before, are about this big. They weigh upwards of 10 pounds, and they consume a lot of power, which means that they can only be used in fixed arrays. And that's great, and they've been used to monitor the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. But there are other applications, and one of my colleagues said to me, they work fine, they're great, but if you could make one that was the size of a hockey puck, you'd really change the business. And I just couldn't help thinking about it. And I puzzled, and eventually I figured out how to do it. And it took me about 5 years. And I'm sure, as any of the people up here would tell you, the good idea is just the beginning. It's all the sweat that comes after that. And you really need a champion for an idea to make it reality. But I'm very lucky in that I enjoy what I do, and I like puzzling about those ideas and making things a reality. So thank you very much, and I'm very honored.
Gosh, if you can do that with a hockey puck, I wonder what you can do with a baseball. Our next honoree is Brian Shoemaker. Now, it's hard to talk about Alaska or Arctic science without talking about permafrost. And I've had the opportunity in my career to work on pipelines, natural gas pipelines. I remember taking a tour across Siberia and seeing a bunch of homes that had pretty much melted into the permafrost. As chair of the Arctic Research Commission, had a chance to work with our nation's climate scientists on understanding the massive change happening on Earth that's happening very, very quickly. And, for all of this, it comes down, if you want roads that work, buildings that don't fall down, bridges that don't fall down, pipelines that don't leak, you kind of need to know what's happening at the temperature of the Earth. And the challenge for engineers is that you need this information real time, and to go out and collect this information itself can mean disturbing the tundra. It can mean It's one of these things where it's hard to observe it without changing what you're observing. And so our honoree today, Brian Shoemaker, invented a system that gives engineers and scientists detailed temperature readings of Arctic installations, and he does it in such a way that you can get these readings from anywhere in the world. In developing his company, Beaded Stream, LLC, Shoemaker saw a more dependable and durable way to measure a series of ground temperatures, and he received a patent for his multi-point digital temperature acquisition system in 2010. Is that 2010? 2010. His device is a cable with a string of temperature sensors spaced at intervals selected by the client. And examples are buried beneath many large buildings on permafrost, and you would find them at the new Dead Horse Aviation Center at Prudhoe Bay, the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation North Slope Facility, and the North Slope Boroughs SA-10 Water and Wastewater Treatment Facility in Barrow. And when coupled with a Beaded Stream remote data logger, people with an internet connection can monitor the solidity of the ground upon which those foundations are standing. While working as a permafrost engineer, Shoemaker for years worked with temperature sensor strings that relied on thermistors that each required its own dedicated cable. Those cable bundles were heavy and inflexible and often cracked at cold temperatures, and their dependability was spotty, and it often forced engineers to interpolate using just a few working data points. And now we've got a reliable, web-enabled, continuous access to ground temperature data that Brian has developed. Environmental monitors for the state of Alaska are also using the system to monitor temperatures of the tundra landscape and allows earlier vehicle access to the tundra by precise measurements of when the delicate surface has frozen up. So you've been helping fill our coffers up there in Juneau, in the capital. And in springtime, the system acts as an early warning system for tundra thawing. And Shoemaker's system has maximized industry access to remote sites via tundra travel, while at the same time preserving the tundra. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Shoemaker.
What inspired me to do this? I'm a practicing engineer. I bill myself as a recovering engineer, as I manage the firm now. And I think that there are two things that I can think of that inspired Beaded Stream as it is today. One is Alaska itself. Alaska's extremism, Alaska's cold, having to do the work myself out on the tundra in my early days on the North Slope. I also had a mentor that hired me as an engineer out of school from the East Coast, didn't know anything, sent me to the North Slope, and he gave me a directive, and he said, Brian, one of the things that we do is, as an engineer in private practice, consulting, collecting fees, and writing reports, is develop recommendations for clients that can pay the bill. But one of the things that I like to do, and that I'm asking you to do, is to take whatever innovation that we learn from the North Slope, and he was talking about oil and gas, and bring that innovation to the bush, and thereby deliver the innovation that you can only get in an environment, a rarefied atmosphere like the oil and gas patch, Kaparic, Alpine, Prudhoe, and then deliver the innovations to the bush. The other thing that we do is we have innovations that come from the bush and can be carried back to the oil patch. And so that's one of the inspiring mantras that I've always respected my mentors for teaching me to do. And I'm interested in trying to do the same with the folks that we hire and send out to the field and develop systems for our customers today. The other inspiration I have are the folks themselves. Alaska is perched on the Pacific Rim as though we're a long way away from everybody. But there have been articles in the paper very recently about innovators that are developing technologies for use in sweeping decks on aircraft carriers. The investment community here in Juneau and Anchorage and Fairbanks are all voicing the same, they're voicing in unison that there's a lot more money available than ideas. And so there's a lot of interesting jobs out there that continue to drive me, that drive us in the direction of integrating with applications that we, before this year, before the year before that, didn't know existed. So I think that the curiosity, the young folks that we keep getting out of the university system, we've had really excellent experience at getting folks from University of Alaska Fairbanks, from Anchorage. We have interns that we've lost to Tesla, and we're trying to win them back. That's tough. But it's really the folks themselves. So thank you, SCoR. Thanks to all of you guys. I appreciate it. This is incredible. It's an incredible honor, and I just want to express that. Thank you.
Our next honoree is Peter Webley. Now, right now, there are at least 6,000 planes in the skies above our planet. More than 1 million people are moving a few hundred miles an hour at heights from a few to 40,000 feet. At least 10,000 of those people are crossing the Arctic Ocean as we speak, heading somewhere. And the ability to move across the country in less than a day is part of modern life. Tell me about it. I was last week in Germany, Tokyo, London, and Washington, D.C. Volcanic ash is one of the few forces of nature that can interfere with global flying. In 1989, a 747 landing at Ted Stevens International Airport in Anchorage descended through a plume from the previous day's eruption of nearby Mount Redoubt. All 4 engines sucked up ash, which melted to form a glass coating inside, leading to the engines needing a total overhaul costing $80 million. I remember watching, I think it was a KLM plane that sat on the runway for months. Well, in 2010, a series of eruptions from a volcano in Iceland sent up ash plumes that stranded 10 million travelers. 20 countries, most of them in Europe, had closed their airspaces. Now, Peter Webley and his colleagues in the Remote Sensing Group at the University of Alaska's Geophysical Institute developed novel tools to predict the drift of volcanic ash and assess its impact on daily operations. And building on more than 20 years of monitoring volcanoes and improving tools to track ash clouds, the University of Alaska Fairbanks Associate Research Professor helped develop one of the first companies to be spun off from the university and develop new intellectual property. The aviation community and other transportation industry planners wishing to avoid putting their infrastructure and personnel at risk have the option of purchasing and obtaining access to online decision support software available from Webley's company, Volcanic Ash Detection, Avoidance, and Preparedness for Transportation, or VADAPT, Inc. for short. And he's also developed other software applications, such as a new approach to archiving online webcam data, and his method also allows users to back up their data despite not having available storage at the beginning of the process. The archived data provides the users to create their own assessments using a large database to analyze and assess patterns and track changes. In 2016, Webley, along with Keith Cunningham, was awarded a U.S. patent for coming up with a new method of validating the accuracy of particle cloud forecasting, transport, and dispersion modes. His role of vice president of the company is one of Webley's many professional interests, and he's also the associate director of research at the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration and deputy director of the Center for the Study of Securities, Hazards, Response, and Preparedness at UAF. Webley is a sought-after expert on natural hazards, event detection, and impact assessment worldwide. Now, I'm going to let him quote himself, but he has said this: preparedness is the key. It's about working together to make it safe for all. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Webley.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this great honour, and also congratulations to all the other inductees this evening. I'd like to thank my girlfriend and partner, Jill Shipman, who is here with me this evening, for supporting me and letting me go with this endeavour and letting me work sometimes through the night with my ideas and asking me why I'm sending an email to myself And that's because I've got an idea and I don't want to write it down, so I'm like, I'll send it to myself and worry about it in the morning. However, sometimes that's probably about midnight when I'm sending it, and I'm looking about 8 hours later. I also like to thank the other researchers in my group at the university who have helped me over the years. Ken Dean, John Dean, they're not the Dean brothers, but they are classified as Dean and Dean, and the students. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is the students that have worked with us. We've graduated multiple students that have gone on to work in federal, state, local government, and that's one of the reasons why I'm at UAF. It's why I came to UF, I guess, 11 years ago. It's why I'm still there. And in terms of the innovation side and sort of what drove me to do this, is that there's so much data out there that we can make use of, that we can help others to prepare themselves. They can integrate it into their operations, so they're aware of what's happening. But they may not be the expert. So you want to design something that they can use from day one, that you tailor to what they want. So integrate them from day one as you process this tool and develop it, such that they're prepared, they're aware of what's happening, and they can make a plan. And that's what I've tried to do, is make it safer for others, as Mead said in my quote from myself, and try to ensure that as a community, as a state, as a country, as a planet, we're prepared for the next hazard. My background's natural hazards, but there's going to be hazards to come, and how we can be ready and use tomorrow's technology today. So thank you.
Now, our last honoree couldn't be here today, and I thought maybe I'd invite Rick Caulfield. Is Rick here? Chancellor of the University of Alaska Southeast, who gave our honoree an honorary degree recently to accept the award for Sandra Lane. Now, those of you who have lived in Juneau a long time probably know Sandra. I can tell you, I moved to Juneau for the second time in my life in 1990, and we had the honor of sharing usually Thanksgiving and Easter dinner with Sandra Lane and a group of other people who love to innovate, love to laugh, love to eat good food. And Sandra was always the guy who was bringing this most wonderful cold smoked salmon, cold smoked halibut, and other fish from Taku Smokeries, Taco Fisheries, which was his company, a multi-million-dollar business and tourist attraction he built in downtown Juneau. Now, he also went into the restaurant business. He ultimately did a number of great things with food, and he retired. And he failed retirement. And so his second venture was as the founder of Alaska Protein Recovery, a company devoted to recovering fish oil, fish protein, and other new products from salmon processing waste and low-grade salmon carcasses. Now, he realized that at Taku Fisheries, he ground up and dumped back to the ocean about 3 million pounds each year, and worried about the nearshore environment and the inevitable market backlash. Not to speak of what we were talking about, what we were saying to him from DEC. Lane thought of turning the discarded fish parts to hydrolyzed fish protein and fish oil. And he purchased a 260-foot barge to travel to salmon processors in different Alaska ports, and he was back in business. Now, this citation quotes his friend Jeff Larson of Alaska Brewing Company. He was surprised Lane jumped back into the game so soon. He said, to quote Jeff, he said, "When Sandro sold Taku Smokeries after a quarter century of being in business, I was happy for him," Larson wrote in a letter supporting the award to Lane of an honorary University of Alaska degree. Sandro then shocked me when he started a new business, and I asked him what on earth made him want to subject himself to the stress of another business startup. Sandro talked about his duty to find a better way to deal with fish waste. Now, Sandro saw both an obligation and an opportunity in using the entire salmon byproduct stream of Trident Seafood's catch can plant, as well as most of the salmon waste stream from other catch can processors. And upon the barge, Alaskan Venture, workers collected salmon byproducts for protein meal and fish oil extraction, but in a unique low-temperature process, preserving nutrients that are lost in the more common high-temperature extraction methods. He was able to create new products. And his cold-pressed and extra virgin fish oil, sold under the Pure Alaska Omega brand, found immediate success at Costco and many other retail markets across the United States, and today it ranks among the most popular brands of omega-3 fish oils in the country. His decision to salvage salmon parts that were otherwise lost to the sea changed the industry and showed a new way of doing business in Alaska. So I'm sorry Sandro can't be here today. He's in Italy, but I was going to ask Rick to say a few words on his behalf. And again, congratulations to Sandro Lane.
It truly was a privilege for me at the University of Alaska Southeast to be part of a ceremony last spring to honor Sandro Lane, to confer on him an honorary doctorate of laws for his distinguished work as an entrepreneur dating back to 1984, and to recognize him as a true exceptional Alaskan. So I know it's unfortunate he's not able to be here tonight, but on behalf of all of his colleagues and all of his friends and his family as well, it's a real privilege to accept this on his behalf. So thank you very much.
Let me sum up by thanking all of our honorees tonight. I'd like to thank Brian Host and the Juneau Economic Development Council for offering to host this as part of this great innovation summit. I've had a chance to participate in other innovation summits, and the work you do has huge statewide impact. I hope you know that and appreciate that, because it doesn't matter where you live in Alaska. Brian has helped us kind of get over and across these frontiers that we're trying to cross. The last thing I want to say is this, is that we, the State Committee on Research, will be offering this set of awards again next year. We'd like to honor 8 innovative Alaskans. There is a way to make a nomination. We've changed the rules a little bit, so you can nominate yourself, but you can nominate others. And we have a good committee that includes past honorees, advocates of innovation and investment in Alaska on the committee. And our deadline is October 1st next year, and we'll have again an award ceremony sometime next winter. But for Alaskans, I think this is a very, very important thing, because as I look at this group of awardees here and what you've done, it's not only, all of you have done things that actually have impacts in global markets, not just here in the state. All of you have done things that makes us a safer, cleaner, more efficient place to live and help build our economy. And all of you have given an example now of what else can be done to help us get on the big challenge that we all have ahead of us, which is to diversify our economy, do a better job of managing our natural resources, and doing a better job of inspiring the world, which is something that we all do naturally. Hey, thank you very much, and congratulations to all the honorees tonight.